Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of We Got Issues. Today, we have someone very special today, but I will read a couple of things about him. He's the president of Metropolis Comics, the world's largest dealership for Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, and Modern Age comics, and ComicConnect.com, the premier online auction company for comics and collectibles. He was the very first person to ever sell Action Comics #1 for $1 million. He also co-founded the longest Comic-Con convention in New York City, Big Apple Comic-Con. Ladies and gentlemen, Vincent Zurzolo, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here. And I saw your star-studded list of guests that you've had in the past, and I'm like, what does this guy want with little old me? But I'm happy to be here in any way, shape, form I can be, and hopefully
Yeah.
I'll do a good job for you.
No, of course. No, you're a fellow collector just like myself, and we've had Ross Ritchie here too as well. So you're actually the second president of a company that's been on our show. So it's always nice to get someone in the business side of it too as well, instead of just the arts and the writing and on comic side, because after all, this is still a business itself. So and your rise uh to this business, to this community, is something unparalleled that I haven't seen before, because now, from what I've read and from the interviews I've seen, not only that you were driven by your passion for comics, but you also have a business sense too as well. Usually that is hard to balance. How are you able to be at the situation that you are right now, and then just going by out of passion? That's unheard of.
Well, so let me take it all the way back to when I was a little boy.
Mhm.
Okay, so I loved comic books even before I could read. And I had two big brothers who collected comic books. My friends in school, we collected comic books together. We loved to draw. So I was always sitting there drawing monsters and soldiers and superheroes and you name it, yeah, Godzilla, Gamera, um, army soldiers, Spider-Man, anything, a Superman, Batman, anything I could do. And my friends would sit there and we'd fold pieces of paper together and staple them and try to draw our comic books and put in words and stuff. So I've loved comic books forever. And I never knew that this was going to be something I'd be doing for a career, but it was always this thing where I loved to draw, I loved art, I loved comic books. Then when I was around 15 years old, I was collecting with my friend across the street who's a few years older than me. He was a coin dealer. He was starting out his own coin business. His father was one of the biggest stamp dealers in the country, and he said one day, "Look, we're collecting comic books together. Why don't we start buying collections and we can improve our
Right.
collections and maybe make a little bit of money?" I
Right.
said, "Okay, but I have no idea how to do that." So
Mhm.
we embarked on this thing called VM Comics, Vincent and Mark's Comics, VM Comics. We
Right.
took out quarter-page ads out in the Comic Buyer's Guide, which was a weekly newspaper
Right.
that came out with classified ads, articles about comic books, and advertisements. So we started buying and selling comic books. I started buying and selling from friends in school, from their neighbors, anybody who had a comic book collection. They would tell me about it, and then I'd go and
Right.
buy it. So I did that all through high school and
Hmm.
college. And when I graduated from St. John's University in 1993, which is shoot 30 years ago, which is hard to imagine because I still
Yeah.
feel like a kid at heart. Um, I was selling comic books in the streets of Manhattan.
Mhm.
Crazy mad shout out to my buddy Kurt Bowlers who took me out there for and I had two card tables, 8 boxes of books, and I was hustling comic books in the streets of Manhattan. And if
Right.
you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. So I was also middlemaning warehouses of books back in the early 90s. There were people packaging comic books 3 for $1, and I could find a warehouse of 100,000 books, make a penny on the deal or two
Right.
pennies on a deal, and move them from one place to the other and make a little bit of money. So I was doing that for about a year. I probably moved, I don't know, 500,000 to 1 million books. I've seen a warehouse
Right.
filled with 1 million comic books, which is incredibly daunting. I was
Right.
literally climbing up boxes to try to get to the top to look inside a box, and they were
Right.
like 20, 20 comic books high, boxes high, and a
Right.
giant warehouse filled. And actually ended up helping to sell that entire warehouse. It was backstock from a chain of comic book stores called Moondogs,
Hmm.
Gary Calabuano's old comic book stores. And Gary's a great guy, and his comic stores were great, but everybody got caught into that when the bubble burst in the comic book market in the early '90s. It was treacherous for anybody with a store.
Right.
Having said that, I took what I was learning from my friend Mark and his father Howard and his father's partner Robert. These were my mentors in learning how to buy and sell collectibles. And if you don't know how to do something, you could read a book, you can watch videos, or you can learn from who who will become your mentor. You
Right.
model yourself after people who are successful
Right.
in doing what you want to do.
Right.
So and as I think we were talking about martial arts before we got on,
Hmm.
and in Bruce Lee's Dana Santos, one of their books is called "Absorb What Is Useful," and then the
Right.
second half of that phrase is "Discard what is not." So you
Right.
take what you're learning from these masters, people who are doing this, and you use what they teach you, and you take the stuff that doesn't really apply to you, what you're doing, and you push that off to the side, and you try to increase your business acumen, the way you're doing things to make yourself as successful as humanly possible. I'll also point to one other aspect of this. Being the son of two immigrants from Calabria, Italy, I learned a lot from my parents. They were role models for me, mentors for me in many different ways. My mother was the consummate hostess at home.
Hmm.
Anybody who walked into her house felt very welcome, and that was one of the things I think I brought into my business practices. Is
Right.
no matter if somebody's spending $10 or $10,000 or $1 million, whatever it is, you treat people with respect, you treat them with courtesy, and you make them feel like, you know, it's important. They're there. Nobody needs comic books. People
Right.
want comic books. So you have to realize that you're not dealing with the necessity of life. Although many collectors like you and I
Yeah.
would argue differently. But
Yeah.
my whole point is you want people to feel welcome, and you want them to be
Hmm.
happy about what they're doing with you. So I learned a lot from both my parents. My father was a restaurateur and chef, and I learned from watching him. And he gave me three very valuable, more than three, but I'll pinpoint three very valuable pieces of advice that I would pass on to anybody who's listening.
Right.
Uh, One is knowledge is power.
Hmm.
When ownership is key for budding entrepreneurs. It's not necessary for everybody, but for me, it struck a chord. But
Right.
knowledge is power to do as well as humanly possible in school. Um, and then never be tired, which is one of my favorite sayings. One time,
Right.
my dad and I were on the phone, and he said to me, "How are you feeling today?" And I said, "Oh, I'm really tired." He goes, "What do you mean you're tired?" "I'm never tired." I said, "I worked really hard." He goes, "You don't work hard. I worked in the kitchen 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day in the heat. You sell comic books." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay, yes, yes, Dad, okay." So that's one of my mottos in my brain. Anytime I'm feeling kind of tired, I go,
Right.
never be tired and just keep pushing through. And
Right.
and then I guess it was another great saying he had is sempre avanti, which means in Italian, always forward. So
Yeah.
you can't do anything about the past. You cannot change the past. The only thing you can
Right.
do is keep moving forward, and you do that in the best way you possibly can. So I
Right.
took all these things, and these things combined with what I learned about business from different people. Also in school, St. John's University was a good business school, and I studied marketing there, and
Hmm.
it really helped me a lot in terms of being able to differentiate my company from a lot of my competition.
Right.
You may have in the future other auction houses on your show, but
Hmm.
I doubt you're ever, or you might not ever have another owner of an auction house on your show. I
Yeah.
take a lot of pride in what I do, and I feel it's very important to be able to tell my story, to share it with people, and share it with you, so that who knows, maybe somebody else is inspired to do something, or maybe
Right.
they're just entertained and have fun for an hour listening to us talk about comic books.
Right.
So to really pinpoint and answer your question, it is a combination of being incredibly passionate about
Hmm.
what I do, loving the business end of it, also loving the creative side of it, because I get to play with funny books all day. This is, to me, the greatest American art form. You have beautiful artwork, incredible stories, incredible creativity, and now for me, something that I've dreamed about since I was a little kid. I'm actually making my own comic book, which I'd love to talk to you a little bit about as well when we get around to it. It's called The Addiction. We're premiering at New York Comic Con in a couple of weeks, which is very nerve-wracking because we
Yeah.
still have so much to get done. Uh, but it is fantastic. So everything combined keeps me alive, keeps me excited, keeps me happy,
Right.
keeps me moving forward, and keeps me energized. And I think if you're not having fun with it, what the heck are you doing it for?
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, I have a BA in marketing too as well, and people don't understand marketing brain. I don't know why. I'm like, you should definitely invest in marketing because I see you doing a lot of interviews. I see a lot of articles about you, and the first thing that came to my mind is that he knows how to market himself.
Mm.
Like
Well,
anything that says, "Hey, you want to market yourself? You want to put yourself in here?" Anything that you could put your face into it, yeah, definitely.
yeah.
I will ask you this though. I know I had a business before in Miami. I have a comic book business. I then sold it a couple of years ago, just before the pandemic hits. I was one of the lucky ones. Um, Not a lot of people know the struggle of entrepreneurship. I spoke with Mr. Ross Ritchie about it before when he first started Boom Studios. He said that he would walk around convention floors asking for artists to work for him, and they were looking at him like he had leprosy, right? Didn't
Yeah.
want anything to do with it. I
Yeah.
want to know what's your struggle. How was because everybody just sees the success that you have now,
Mm,
right? The
mm,
action comics that you've sold, the
yeah.
fact that you're president of two companies, that you started Big Apple Comic Con and all that stuff. But what was the struggle? Like, how was the struggle?
Sure.
What
Sure.
happened during that time? Because I think that's important for a lot of people to know, because people just look at this and say, "Oh, I can do what he's doing." Obviously, you can, but you have to understand the struggle that you went
Sure.
through to be where
Sure.
you are right now, right?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, I tip my hat to you if you owned a comic book store and you kept it alive for a while. That is a tough business, and that's something I've worked at a comic book store, but I've never run my own comic book store. I think it's a very daunting task. Uh, that's first of all. Second of all, about Ross Ritchie of Boom Studios, who's having fantastic success with his
Mhm.
company. Um, what a great guy! I got to spend a day with him at Boom Studios, and he shared so many great stories with me. And he's also been a big help for me when I've had questions about The Addiction, my comic book. So that's been fantastic. And I can share with you different struggles. Well, first off, I also want to say one other thing that I'm very proud of having been a part of is I started Metropolis Gallery, NYC, which is the only art gallery dedicated to comic book and fantasy art in New York City. And that was really big up until the pandemic. And since then, we've repurposed some of our space in our showroom, but we've had some really great shows. We had a Frazetta retrospective. We had um, a Walking Dead show. We had a Hildebrand show, which was Masters of Fantasy, which was a combination of different artists. We've had John Cassidy, J. Scott Campbell, Simone Bianchi, Sean Murphy, Ken Lashley, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a whole
Ooh.
bunch of others. But that was really a lot of fun for me, and the struggles that come into play in terms of being successful is you're always going to run into problems. Nobody's life is easy. Somebody out there sees me selling $1 million comic book. I had some very lean years. I remember flying out to the West Coast to WonderCon and
Mhm.
barely breaking, and not even breaking even. I mean, when you took my time into account, I probably lost my shirt on multiple shows that I had to
Right.
travel around. But I was building something, and I would say one of the other big uh, obstacles to overcome was back in like 1996. I was at a convention in New York,
Mhm.
and I was using a van because I didn't have enough money to rent a van. So I borrowed a friend's van. My friend's van was a van he used at a junkyard. It had no locks on it. So I was making multiple trips to and from the convention at the end of the day down to the van. And I said, where are my books going to be safer? On the streets of Manhattan, or on the streets of Manhattan, or in the convention under my table. And so I left them under my
Right.
table, asked a friend to watch it, came back upstairs. He had his back to my boxes, and my four best boxes were gone. And I had
Wow.
no insurance. And it was April 2nd. I thought somebody was playing a April Fool's joke on me, and they weren't. And two things came from that. Number one, I remember my friend said his father always told him that every dark cloud has a silver lining, which was very hard for me to see at that point. But There's a direct correlation to that that theft leading to, I believe, me becoming partners with my partner Stephen Fischler at Metropolis and Comic Connect. But having said that, just the fact that I had to overcome what was a massive loss. I had collectibles that I had comic books that I bought the night before, hadn't sold a single one. I had people's consigned items on my in my inventory that were gone. So I had to pay a lot of people back and pay money. And then also the hard costs of losing those books. Had to dip into my personal collection to try to start building up an inventory. But I was depressed for about a month. And I remember
Mm.
one morning I woke up and I said to myself, if I keep acting like this, then these guys really stole something from me.
Right.
So I vowed, it was like a moment in a comic book. I vowed at that moment, I wrote it down on a piece of paper. I will work 10 times harder than I have ever worked before. I will work 10 times faster than
Mhm.
I've ever worked. I will work 10 times smarter than I've ever worked before. Within 3 months, I was back at break even and I moved forward. And I gained, I believe, a lot of um, respect from my peers, and also I also gained the ability that no obstacle was going to stop me. I could overcome anything in life to continue going forward.
Right.
Like I said earlier, my father's saying "sempre avanti," always forward.
Mhm.
So with that, I pushed myself, and when you take losses and you take hits, anybody who tells you they win all the time, whether they're a gambler or a business person or whatever they are, they're full of it. Nobody wins all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and and it's not easy, but if you're passionate about something, you really want it badly enough, you go after it, and you have to educate yourself. So those are things that I say are really important. But I've also, in the last, Steve and I have been partners 24 years. I mean, not
Mhm.
not a day goes by where I don't feel like there's some type of obstacle we're trying to overcome, whether
Yeah.
it be competing against other auction houses or dealers to try to buy a deal, or what have you. Is always
Mhm.
something. So,
Yeah. Have you ever had, I mean, like, it's impossible that you haven't, but uh can you think of the time where you just kind of just say, fuck it, I don't want to do this anymore?
oh yeah, there's a lot of low moments where you're going, shit, man, I just don't want to deal with things like being doing this stuff anymore.
Mhm.
One time I had a pallet at San Diego Comic Con, and the driver who used the pallet jack, instead of
Right.
getting into the slat for the pallet, was above it and crunched
Oh no.
into comic books. And he happened to just hit a bunch of mile highs, which are like the most prized
Oh
possessions you can imagine. And I
no.
just sat, like, there were days like that where you're like, really, man, I just
Yeah.
or you do everything in your power, and somebody ships something and it ends up getting stolen somewhere in the mail.
Right.
And I've had that happen multiple times. And
Mhm.
you try to do the best you can to recover and
Yeah.
make a positive outcome out of that. But man, there's a lot of scary things that happen in business and in life,
Yeah.
and things that make you want to just throw up your hands and walk away. But at my core, I hate quitting. I am not a
Mhm.
quitter.
Mhm. Mhm.
Accepting defeat is not something that
Mhm.
I am ready to do. I mean, I'm even really terrible when it comes to sports. I hate losing when it comes to almost anything.
Right.
You hear about a lot of like professional athletes who absolutely hate losing. It
Right.
could be the stupidest little game, like a professional football player who hates losing in cards, or so, like
Right.
a simple game that they play with family and friends.
Right.
So I'm like that, but what I've tried to do over the years is temper that with
Mhm.
being able to enjoy yourself. Because if you're always sour and bitter about everything you don't get or
Mhm.
anytime you lose,
Mhm.
you're just going to be a miserable person. And who the hell wants to be around that? And you don't want
Right.
to be around that. You want to be a positive,
Right.
a force for being positive in this world. You want to
Yeah.
be a force to try to like make sure that you're doing well for yourself, for your family, for
Mhm.
your loved ones, as well as setting an example, a positive example
Mhm.
out there. And I think,
Yeah.
not that I'm not trying to sound too preachy. You're asking me
Of
questions that
course.
are very near and dear to my heart.
Of
Um,
course.
so there are always challenges, man.
Yeah.
There's always something bad that happens, and you just
Yeah.
have to kind of pick yourself up by your bootstraps and just keep going
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah. I mean, let me give you let me ask you a probably a moment of clarity and honesty for a lot of people. In your opinion, is entrepreneurship for everybody?
No, it's not. There are many people who um, are better suited to being employed by somebody else or being in an organization. I'll give you, for example, my brothers and I all grew up with the same parents. One of my brothers is a teacher. He's absolutely fantastic with kids, and my brother Jerry and my brother Sal has worked in a law firm for his career, and they both prospered and have. My brother Sal has three great kids. His wife. My brother Jerry has done incredibly well
Mhm.
educating children, and so there's not one path to success for anybody out there. If you love comic books, you don't have to be an entrepreneur. You could work for somebody else in the business. You could work in publishing. You could work in marketing. There's so many different things you could do. And what's really blown my mind away, the longer I've been in this business and the more I've networked and become friends with people in this business, is learning how many different ways there are to be
Mhm.
part of the collectibles world. And obviously this goes beyond comic books and collectibles. You can either be an entrepreneur or not in anything you do, almost anything.
Mhm. Now, I want to ask you about Metropolis Comics. I was there in 2019. Uh, the best year before the pandemic hits. You had J. Scott Campbell experience in there. I
Yeah.
was part of the experience there. It was my first time being in that building, and I swear there was a trail of my drool all over your carpet there because
You were the guy, huh?
I was that guy. The amount of original art. I mean, my God, I can't even pinpoint where it all began. Like I can't be like, oh yeah, I think this is the first time that he got an original art because it could be anywhere from like 1940s, 1950s, 1960s. The most amazing thing I've seen, like you had pages from X-Men #1 in there. I
Yeah.
mean, how did you get started? What was your very first original art that was in that building? And
That's a great question.
yeah,
So I
and
love.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
and then how did you? And then this is just for me personally. How did you get the funds to actually
Mm,
get that started, because that's not a cheap business too as well. A lot of
no.
people think that they can just take original art and be like, oh yeah, I can just sell this to a very comic book lover. Like that's not how it works,
Mm,
right?
yeah. So to answer your question, first of all, I'm glad you enjoyed yourself at our gallery. We really tried to build not only the art gallery shows, but the permanent exhibit, in which you referenced the X-Men #1 page by Jack Kirby, um, and as something that people could not see anywhere else in the world. So, having said that, how did I get started? The first piece of art I bought that I can remember was at a Chicago Comic Con in August of, I believe it was 1994,
Mhm.
and I bought a Marshall Rogers uh, pen and ink sketch of Batman with his cape and cowl, just really beautiful. And the funniest thing, about 5 years ago, I'm on the phone with a friend of mine, and we're chatting, and he says to me, I'm standing in my office, and he says, "What was the first piece of art you ever bought?" And I start mentioning this Marshall Rogers Batman piece, which I bought for $40. I'll never forget it. And he
No.
goes, "Oh my God, that was my piece. I sold that to you." And I started thinking about it, and it registered because there are not a lot of very tall, bald black guys who collect comic books in our business. He's a very tall
Yeah,
guy, like
it's
big guy.
true.
And then when I thought about it, I went, "Oh yeah, that's right. I bought it from him. Holy crap. I didn't know him at the time, but over the decades, we become incredibly good friends. In fact, when he comes to New York, he stays with me." So I was
Yeah.
like sitting there going, "Holy crap, this is like," and he said to me, "That's one piece I really regret selling." And I thought that was really weird because this guy's had so many great comic books in his
Right.
collection that I thought, I was surprised that he mentioned like that was something he.
Yeah.
I happen to love that piece. It's my only Marshall Rogers piece. I've tried to get Marshall Rogers art. It's not the easiest artist to snag. They're very competitive
Yeah.
for his artwork in the market. But you asked, how did I build up my collection? So um, I invest a lot of my money in comic books and original comic art. And I started a long time ago with comic books, but I'd say comic art probably been, other than that piece and a couple other pieces, probably only around, I don't know, 20, 25 years with the original art. But what I've done is I've just saved up money and I've bought original art and comic books.
Mhm.
I own that X-Men #1 page. And the reason I bought it was I said to myself, how often are you going to get a chance to own a page from X-Men number one? It's expensive, but I'm going to hold on to it. And it was actually turned out to be a very good investment. It's probably gone probably 6 times what I paid for it
Yeah,
over the years. I also another thing I believe very firmly in is collect what you love. And even if it doesn't go up in value, or even if it loses money, or goes down in value, you still have something you really love. So that's what I did with comic books. And I just happened to also get, I was very good foresight, and obviously
yeah.
being so close to it, I know what's good and what's bad. And I also, but there's so many things you can collect.
Mhm.
There are artists that I collect that my partner doesn't collect, and vice versa. I happen to love Gil Kane. He's one of my favorite artists.
Yeah,
For Zeta is another famous favorite of mine. Bill Everett is one of my favorites.
right.
Stephen Platt from the more modern age of comic books, from
Yeah,
gosh, modern age 30 years ago.
yeah.
Um, so there's a whole host of Todd McFarlane. I love Todd McFarlane.
Yeah.
I own one, two, three, four amazing Spider-Man McFarlane covers, which
I
is
think I
pretty
saw,
cool.
yeah, I think I saw one of them there too as
Yeah,
well. Yeah, I
got a
always
couple
tell,
more.
I always tell people when they're comic book fans and they're going to New York Comic Con, and I'm not lying just because you're in front of me. I tell people all the time, go visit Metropolis Comics if you can,
Mm,
because
yeah.
I tell them that may masquerade as a gallery. I tell them that's a damn museum. Okay, like
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
to be in there. I mean, just for me, I could never thought to be in the presence of all those pages in my whole life. Like that is an impossibility. Like I could have never imagined that. When I was there, I almost forgot I was there for J. Scott Campbell. I was just walking around and I'm just like,
Mm,
because when you see an original art, for everyone who doesn't know original art from like 1960s, 1970s, and 50s, the way that they did the covers is that they had to draw the image first and then put the caption or the title and then put a wax in it so you will know it's an original art because it has a different color because of the way the wax is yellowing and the page is white. And I'm just like, wow, I was at awe at that. So I mean, there has to be you probably get a lot of people coming by just wanted to stare and look. I'm like, do you guys have like regular visits kind of thing, or
yeah, yeah.
you guys
We have
talk about
people
doing
from,
that?
especially international comic collectors, will come in to visit the gallery, and one of my guys, or if I'm free, I'll give a little tour. And I love talking about this stuff. I mean, there's no place in the world I think you can go to where you'll see, you know, artwork from Daredevil number one, Avengers number one, X-Men number one, Journey
Nowhere
to
else.
Mystery 83, Frank Frazetta oil paintings, famous funny covers by Frank Frazetta, uh, tons of Carmen Infantino flash art, Neil Adams
Oh
everywhere,
my
Bernie
god.
Wrightson everywhere, and then the cover to House of Secrets '92,
Oh my
to
god. Yeah,
cover
you have
to
iconic
remember that.
covers. You have iconic
Yeah,
covers there with the Joker coming out of the genie bottle kind of thing. I forgot what number that was. Detective Comics it was. I forgot what it was.
69, I think.
69, I think it was. Yeah.
69.
I think you also had Journey to Mystery, right?
Yep, I mentioned that. Yeah, Journey to Mystery '83. We have 3 pages from that book
Oh
in
my
the
oh my
in
god.
on display. Yeah. So it's a lot of fun. Original
It's
art is
insane.
fantastic. And it also, I think it also, just like a comic book, it transports you in time to a different place.
Hmm.
And it's really wonderful. I certainly love collecting it. I have saved a lot of money up to try to buy original comic art. But one thing I would tell anybody who's listening is you don't have to have a ton of money to build a
Hmm.
nice art collection. My best advice to anybody out there who's trying to build a collection, whether it be comic books, artwork,
Hmm.
cards, whatever it is, figure out what your budget is,
Hmm.
okay, for the year or month, whatever you need to do. This is how much I can spend. I would then take out 10% of that and have it for miscellaneous, because there's always going to be something cool you're going to see. And if you're not incredibly disciplined and you do want to have fun, you want to leave yourself a little bit of a buffer. Now,
Hmm.
having said that, the other thing I would do is educate yourself. You have to educate yourself, learn about the different aspects of who you want to collect, what you want to collect. With it's a comic book, what titles, what writers, what artists. If it's artwork, what art you want to collect. Well, same thing goes. And then you figure all that stuff out, and you start figuring out, okay, if I budget X number of dollars per year, here's what I can actually do.
Hmm.
Um, and another thing you can try to do is always keep your eyes out for a deal. There are certain times where you might
Hmm.
go and look at something and go, boy, I think this is underpriced, or you're bidding in one of our auctions or one of the many auctions out there and say, wow,
Mhm.
that I think this is worth 10 grand and it's only at 3 grand. I'm going to buy that. Or $1,000 and you buy it for $300, or $100 and you get it for $30. Whatever it is,
Right.
there's angles there to play, and then you can parlay that money, which is kind of how I built a business, is buying collections and selling them, buying collections and selling them,
Exactly.
starting an auction house and working on commissions there,
Yeah.
and having the art gallery show, working on commissions there. So it's just really, really a lot of fun, and I think
Yeah.
anybody can do it. That's what my advice would be.
Yeah, not a lot of people actually know. Like, we were talking about, like, entrepreneurship's not for everybody. Not a lot of people know that you don't really get paid right away when you're an entrepreneur, because you have to reinvest the money to your business and
Yeah,
keep going, right?
yeah.
Which leads me to my next question. Comic Connect. It is the premier online auction house for comics and collectibles. Now, let's talk about live selling. How are you able to stay on top with the rise of online selling nowadays?
Well, I think online selling is a very, very strong part of a lot of people's businesses. We are building back towards doing live selling. We were doing some of that during the pandemic, and we strayed away from it. We really tried to double down and really pursue more our core business, which is auctions and buying and selling. But I do love live shows. I've watched some of my friends do it. I've seen
Right.
them be very successful with it, and I absolutely do believe it is an integral part of any business plan in terms of being a comic book professional dealer or anything like that. So yeah, it's something that's important for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, definitely. Because I always tell people all the time, because I do online selling too as well now, here and there. But I always tell people, like, when they're looking for prices of like how much they want to pay for, I always tell them, look at Comic Connect, because that's
That's very
usually what I
nice of you.
use. That's what I usually use for kind of like a range kind
All
of
right,
thing,
that's
right?
cool.
'Cause-
And we have a great sold section. You can click on sold and
right.
look up what you want to look at. One of the interesting things about Comic Connect that many people don't know is when we started, we piggybacked off Metropolis, our original brand, and to try to build up this new business. And it was really tough. I thought we'd get better penetration much faster.
Mhm.
But what ended up happening is we were giving away our service for 6 months and we still didn't get that far. What
Mhm.
happened, what was the changing point, the turning point for us, was we got an Action Comics #1 in 6.0,
Mhm.
and that was, I think, 2008. This is and it ended up selling at that time for what was a record, I believe, $317,100 for
Wow.
6.0. Now 6.0 nowadays would be $3 million or something.
Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy. But having said that, it just goes to show you, like, again, we faced challenges in trying to start this new brand, and we fought
Mhm.
through and persevered and kept pushing and pushing and pushing until we
Mhm.
found what worked. So
Right.
it's very important. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, I want to ask you too as well, that we've gone through like how you built up this company and how you're able to stay on top. I mean, at this point, what's next? What's next for you, sir?
I'm glad you asked. So every day I'm trying to improve my company, to improve my business. I never think that where we're at is the best we can be. I always think we can improve and improve and improve. So, in all
Mhm.
aspects of our company and our business, we're trying to do that all the time. But and even making our own t-shirts,
Right.
which I think is really snazzy.
I
The
see
past
that.
is your
Yeah, I,
future.
I
Yeah.
like
But
that.
but um but what I've tried to do is find a new challenge, and my new challenge is the comic book, The Addiction, and I'm very proud and excited about this project. I'm partners with David Quinn, who was the co-creator and writer for Faust with Tim Vigil. He's also written Doctor Strange, Ghost Rider, Lady Death, you name it. He's written a ton of stuff. And David and I have been partners for quite some time with this comic book project, and we're going to be premiering The Addiction at New York Comic Con, October 12th through the 15th. We have some really exciting aspects to this, which I'd love to share with you. First off, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the comic book. So, at its core, The Addiction is about second chances. Imagine there's a doctor. Her name is Dr. Nikki Tino, and she is dedicated to fighting drug addiction and laser focused, workaholic, has put everything else aside.
Mhm.
And she's gotten so good at it, the local drug cartels take notice of her and they say, let's make an example out of her. They kidnap her and they want to make her look like she's a drug addict. They shoot her up with a cocktail of drugs. And she goes through what a lifelong junkie would go through in one
Right.
night. And
Hmm.
the drugs kill her and she
Wow.
dies. And then the chemicals mix with her blood and bring her back to life. Now she's got a second chance to do things a little differently and an uncanny ability. From her slightest touch, she can inject any type of drug into a person's body. And
Oh
thus
wow.
begins the adventures of the addiction.
Oh wow.
So, our comic book is a 3-issue series to start with, and we're going to have other series afterwards. But it really focuses on introducing you to the character and Nikki Tino and her boyfriend Enzo and our madcapped crazy bunch of villains, including my favorite villain, Mr. Licorice, who is a candy coated super criminal. All of his crimes, all of his weapons are candy themed. And he has a sidekick named Bette Noir, who is an aspiring social media starlet who figured, how can I get my number of followers up? I know, I'll be a sidekick to a supervillain. Um, so it's a serious comic book, but it's also has comedy. It has
Right.
romance because Nikki, when she was alive before, didn't have time for romance, and she realized she had been doing that wrong, and so now she's got a
Right.
boyfriend, and it adds a certain element to the comic book story because in our comic book, she's Superman and he's Lois Lane, and it's
Right.
kind of an interesting thing to shift and take a look at.
Yeah.
The other things you should know about our character is Nikki is biracial. She's half Chinese American and half Italian American. Reason we did that, we wanted our character to have a very interesting look, unique type of look. We also, my partner David and I are
Mhm.
both amazing foodies. We're really big foodies, and we
Right.
wanted to incorporate our love of food into the comic books. And so we did that with the addiction having two beautiful, incredible cultures to borrow from.
Right.
And one of the most unique things about our comic book is this is the first time in comic book history that first of all, I pitched this comic book idea to many publishers, and
Right.
while nobody was willing to take it on, which is quite all right, everybody has their own vision of
Right.
what they're doing. Many of them, most of them, I'd say almost all of them, said to me they'd never seen a character with these powers before, which I think is pretty good
Right.
considering how long comic books have been around. Second thing, this is the first time you will see product placement in a comic book done on purpose, cross branding, cross promoting. We are launching the first comic book with my favorite pizzeria in New York City, Grimaldi's at Limelight, which is an old church on 20th Street and 6th Avenue. And if you go into Grimaldi's the week of New York Comic Con and you order the addiction special, which will be pepperoni, mushrooms, and truffle oil, you will get a QR code and you'll be able to read part of the comic book and also order it online, as well as our digital version, the digital collectible, which is the second thing I'd love to talk to you about, what makes this very interesting. We have
Right.
partnered with Vivi, with VEVE, which is one of the biggest companies in the comic book world. They did $1.2 billion in sales in their first year, and they
Right.
sell digital collectibles, digital comic books. And
Wow.
they have the license for Marvel and DC. And we will be the first comic book that Vivi will be launching a print version limited to 2,000 copies, a VV Blue and a VV Red New York Comic Con, New York City versions, as well as a digital version. And
Right.
we will have 5 covers online to be ordered through Vivi, and that's another exciting part of this. So you have this really fun comic book. You have actually, it takes place in New York, which was very important to me. I'm a Marvel guy, so I wanted my
Right.
comic books to live in the same city that the Marvel characters live in. New York City, which I believe New York is another character in the story because
Yeah.
of the way New York City is. I'm a proud New Yorker, and but not a jerk New Yorker. When I see
Yeah.
tourists in my town, I want to make them feel as happy and welcome as
Yeah.
possible. I'm always there to help them with directions or
Yeah.
something like that. But if you're walking too slow, get out
Yeah.
of the way. No, I'm just
I,
kidding.
I I think that's just a stereotype for New Yorkers because like I grew up in Toronto in Canada, so I was like in the East Coast too as well. I think it's just that people have somewhere to go, like
They're
and
busy.
like we're busy, right? I think that's why most movie stars like to live in New York because nobody minds them because we have
Hmm.
somewhere to go.
Hmm.
We got work to do, right? So that's just a stereotype for New York. I'm like I don't think that's true at all. I've asked this to a lot of artists and I've asked this to a lot of writers, And I think from a business perspective, you will be the very you'll be the prime person to answer this. How what do you feel about, I mean, how do you feel about AI art? Is that,
Um,
are you for AI art, or are you not
I
for it?
I
Because I
think
mean,
I think.
you
Sorry, go
know,
ahead, please,
no,
please.
no, no, that's quite all right. Because being that, if I'm thinking the exact same way you're thinking, and you love like these amazing original arts and everything else, I'm already assuming that you're not for it. But I want to hear it from you directly
So
from a business perspective.
s-
Are you for it?
so as an I don't even consider myself an artist, but let's just say from looking at from an artistic perspective, I can see why it's very scary and how it will take people's jobs away from them in many ways. But I believe anything that takes away somewhere else, there's something given. I think there's always plus and minus and everything. Um, so having said that, I can totally understand why artists would be very against it, but I don't see how it's going to be. You can stop it. So I think there are ways to embrace it and maybe even utilize it. Now I can say from somebody like me with a very limited background as an artist to draw, it could be very helpful in terms of creating visuals for something. But I do think at the end of the day, you want something that's organic from somebody's mind and hands. And yeah, so I would say I probably am not as strongly against it as most creators would be. Uh, I think maybe the fact that I'm a businessman and also can see how it can be utilized in business to better the business. But overall, I do understand the concerns and the problems with it, the challenges with it. I personally have tried to use AI just to come up with some visuals of something, and I found it incredibly difficult to figure out.
Mm.
So maybe it's not as easy as everybody says. But having talked about art, I actually happen to have something right by me that I wanted to share with you.
Okay.
So just should be inspiration for anybody out there thinking about making their own comic book who can't draw worth a darn.
Right. Right.
So when I was in my mid 20s is when I first came out with The Addiction, and this is the first drawing
Oh. Oh. Wow.
of The Addiction. And this description here is the first description, and it was originally a male character. He was an undercover narcotics cop. You can
Right.
even see the little syringe there,
Yeah. I'm
right
like looking
there.
at it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you have this guy. His name was Detective Nicotino,
Right.
and obviously Nicky Tino or Nick
Yeah.
Otino is a play on nicotine, the addiction.
Yeah.
And he gets busted by the mafia. He's been trying to
Yeah.
infiltrate, and the same thing happens to him. But
Right.
what happens to him is he loses his mouth from the agony he was going through,
Right.
and his smoldering black hair now.
Yeah.
And so I drew that and originally, and started working on that, and then drew a couple of other things. Here's another drawing of his head, you can see, and then a third one, which again, nothing too great, but
Right.
these were the beginnings. And then eventually we started working on how could this be more interesting, maybe more marketable. We like the idea of
Right.
changing the character into a woman, a female character, and then
Mm,
this was a later on drawing of Nikki.
that's
Um,
actually pretty
Very
good.
fashionable. This is not by me, by the way. This is
Yeah.
by a very talented Eisner Award-winning artist named Aletha Martinez, who is actually
Wow.
going to be drawing she's drawn one of the covers for issue number one. Now, having said that, and here's another image. Having said that,
Yeah.
just to give you some perspective on this comic book, I started coming up with this comic book idea back in 1995, 96, when I
Hmm.
was sitting I had a drafting table in my basement where I
Right.
ran my comic book business from. And I was having a very existential moment trying to figure out, what am I going to do with my life? Why am I here? Why do I exist? And I
Right.
channeled that into a comic book and said, well, here, what if a guy, his goal was to fight drug addiction and fight the drug war? And how would that shape
Right.
up? And then I started bringing the comic book ideas into it, and it created The Addiction. I always loved the name. I thought it was a really
Right.
strong name. I think something that people can't forget.
Yeah.
Um, and then partnered up with David Quinn, who is again just an incredible writer and just a super guy.
Right.
Uh, and then found Aletha Martinez, who was at the time a protege for Joe Quesada. And here's some other early. These are
Sure.
just copies of early drawings
Oh wow.
of Nikki and You
Those
can
are really
see
nice.
her, yeah, and there's early logo for the addiction, and here's like some more
Yeah,
art.
yeah,
So uh, suffice it to say, we actually did a first issue, and then we never went to print with it.
yeah.
At the time, I just wasn't confident enough that I could do it in
Hmm.
a successful manner, and also I wasn't also willing to risk the money that it would take
Hmm.
to do it the right way. And what happened to me is during the pandemic, during the lockdown, I was still running my business in Manhattan. I was one of
Hmm.
the only people who kept their businesses open in Manhattan. And I would ride my bike to and from my office. And on the way, the only people in the streets of Manhattan
Right,
were military, police, and drug addicts.
right,
That's what I saw every day. And every day you watch the news and you heard if you touched the wrong thing and then touched your face, you were going to die. And
right.
I remember having like anxiety over this, thinking, oh my God,
Yeah,
what am I going to do? I'm going to die if I touch them. And then one day I said, if I die tomorrow, if my number was up tomorrow,
right,
what would I regret never having done in my life?
right.
I didn't have a very long list, but at the top of it is I wished I had made a comic book. So I
Yeah,
called up David and I said, David, I think it's time to revive the
yeah,
addiction. I'd like to start working on this with you again,
right.
come up with a new story, a new idea, and bring it to market.
Yeah,
And I was so happy. He was totally on board. He was
right,
at a great place in his life. He was ready to do it. I was ready to do it. We decided to start working on it
right,
and make sure. And in the beginning, it was just like a passion project. We were going to get it done right before putting any type of constraints on. It has to be this. It has to be brought to market at this
right,
point. But having said that, our goal was 2023, and
right.
so I have pushed as hard as I possibly can. The books are at the printers. We have fantastic covers
It's all
by
set.
yeah, they're coming in soon. I can't wait. So we have fantastic covers by artists like Andres Labrada, who's an up and coming superstar. This guy's going to be great.
Yeah,
He is great. He's going to be big.
yeah,
Aletha Martinez, who again, an Eisner Award winning artist, really, really fantastic human being.
yeah.
And David Mack, creator of Kabuki, creator of Echo, the character Echo
Ooh,
from Daredevil. David's a friend of mine. They're all friends of mine from different parts of my
yeah.
life. Labrada, I actually happened to run into at a little tiny comic convention in Miami, and he walked up to me and showed me his book called Coffee Shop of Horrors.
Yeah,
Coffee Shop of Horrors,
yeah,
Koshu, Coffee Shop Koshohu, something like that.
yeah.
I never remember the
Right.
acronym, but and then we also were very fortunate to get Art Germ on board to do a cover,
Wow.
and he's fantastic, such a nice
Yeah,
guy, and did such a beautiful job. And
yeah.
each cover has a very distinct look. Art Germ's digital art. Aletha's cover is so good; it's in black and white.
Hmm.
Labrada captures everything between manga and European
Yeah,
style art and blends it together. And I think it just, or I should say, manga and American art,
yeah.
and blends it
American art.
together.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then comic art, and then of course David Mack, whose paintings are
yeah,
so unique. And second you see it, you know that's a
yeah.
David Mack piece.
Oh
And
yeah,
then our interior artist was not easy to come by. We looked high and low for the right artist, and eventually, through Elena Casagrande, who is a fantastic comic
right.
artist from Italy, she recommended her friend Claudia Balboni out of Rome,
Yeah,
Italy. And Claudia, we've been so fortunate to have her as part of our team. She's
right.
been just incredible. And then I shouldn't leave off our letterer Dave Sharp, who is fantastic, and our colorist Brad Simpson, who's also just amazing to work with. These are just consummate professionals. And when you see the right type of lettering, it just makes a comic book that much better. When you see the right
Right.
colors, it can make or break a comic book. And
Yeah.
we've been so fortunate to have really, really amazing professionals working with us on this.
Oh
So
yeah.
we're
Most
launching
definitely.
this. We're launching this comic book. I am feel so confident that if I could just get people in front of me at this convention, that they're going to give the addiction a chance. You're going to be able to buy it at theaddiction.co soon. The website's coming very soon.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to buy it at comic book stores probably either December or January. We're putting that off a little bit. We wanted to really do this launch with our variants. All the variants that we're bringing to market at New York Comic Con are New York City variants, and as well as we have some hollow foil, we have embossed, we have foil covers, and then we're doing some metal covers, and we're actually even going to be doing uh, a jeweled cover, which is going to be really cool. So
Yeah.
we've got these like unique ideas that we're putting into play. We already have 2,000 copies sold, which is really cool.
Wow.
And so we're off to the races. And people sometimes will ask me, like, what is your hope for the addiction? And I have to say, quite honestly, that when I first started off with this, I wanted to use the comic book as a launching pad to get into other mediums like animation, television, and movies,
Hmm.
and licensing. And I still do want those things, but I said to myself, you know, better off crawling before you walk, walking before you run.
Right.
Let's just start off by
Hmm.
making a great comic book that people
Right.
will enjoy reading. And that is my really 100% hope, is that somebody somewhere out there will actually just like reading my comic book, our comic book. It's just,
Yeah.
it would make me really happy. And I think Nikki's also, um, we're not preachy about drugs or anything like
Hmm.
that, like trying to tell people not to use drugs. Um, but we will have an ad. We'll have that's another thing. In our regular editions, direct editions, we'll have
Right.
advertising pages, including one where if you have a problem with drugs, you can call an 800 number to get some help. We thought that was a very important thing because we're not trying to glamorize drugs. There's a couple
Yeah.
of things you should know about Nikki. One thing is when Nikki uses her powers, her skin, she doesn't have a costume per
Right.
se. Because I always thought, if I was a superhero, there's no way I'd be walking around in a costume
Yeah.
because you're putting a bullseye on your chest.
Of
Everybody
course.
knows who you are, where you are, and they can come get you. And
Yeah.
Nikki's not invulnerable. She can heal herself using drugs, but still, if somebody blows her brains apart, she's kind of done for.
Right.
So, but one of the things we did is we don't have a costume per se, but when she uses her powers, her touch, her skin turns a chalky white and
Hmm.
her eyes turn black. So that's her costume, but you
Right.
only see it when she uses her powers. The other thing that's interesting about Nikki is her powers are not unlimited. She has to recharge. And just in the same way, you and I can recharge our energy by eating food, she can do
Right.
that. But she can also do it a little bit faster and charge up by eating drugs. And there's a scene in our first issue where
Yeah.
she's just trying to escape this drug cartel she's been trying to
Yeah.
break up. And there's a table filled with cocaine and
Right.
marijuana and you name it. It's all that. And at one point she's like, and she just buries her head
Yeah.
into a bag of coke, and then
Right.
she's ready to go and she's powered up. And so we're trying to use stuff that's shocking, interesting, funny, strange, quirky,
Hmm.
to make this comic book stand out from the rest of the crowd. Um, and my hope is that it'll have a really great response, and
Yeah.
then eventually we can get to those other things. I've already had conversations with IP attorneys. I've had
Yeah.
conversations with people who are intrigued about it. I also have
Yeah.
we're going to be launching with a company. It hasn't been officially announced yet, but a company called Legible, which will be a very big company for ebooks, and they want the addiction to be part of their offerings.
You're
And
right.
so we were trying to hit as many angles as possible to get as many people exposed to our comic book as possible. And another thing that's really important about the comic book is that Nikki is should be seen as very empowering for women. We
Hmm.
wanted this character to be a strong role model for kids as well as adults, in the
Right.
sense that you know you can you can fight the good fight. You can you can do the right thing. You can be a power for a force for good in
Right.
this world. And I really want to make sure that we hold true to the ideals of the character in everything we do. And there
Right.
will be stories in the future that will be darker, and there will be stories in the future that will be lighter. But for now, we are starting with this story, which is the origin. It's getting to know her, and also seeing the romance between her and her boyfriend Enzo, and getting to know a little bit more about New York and about the villains and about the big bad that's hiding in the background,
Right.
who is really a very interesting character as well. I don't want to spoil too much, but
Well,
it's a lot of fun.
I was gonna say, I'm like, where can I get this book? Because
Exactly, that's what
based
I
on
want to hear.
the people that you mentioned there, David Mack. I mean, a lot of people, and Stanley Archer there too as well to do some covers. Not a lot of people know. I'm just gonna side note a little bit here. A mutual friend of ours, Andre Labrada, which I'll talk to you about it a little bit later.
Yeah.
He is a hidden gem. And I'm
Yes.
not quite sure people know this because he is like a hidden gem out of everyone. I know you said Stanley Archer. This is just my personal opinion, so I won't get you in trouble. I think that he would be the successor to a Stanley Archer type of arts.
Well,
That's the way how good
that's
his art is.
that's interesting. I think he would be really thrilled to hear you say that. Hopefully, he'll listen to this and he'll get a kick at it. But it's because Archerm works in digital a lot. I
Mhm,
didn't see Labrada as something like that, but what I
mhm,
do see him as is I think that he has a beautiful way of combining manga in I think a more a digestible format for American audiences. Even though manga is very popular in the United States,
mhm.
his style again borders. And when you see the cover, I'll send you some images of the covers
Right.
for you to look at. But when you see his covers, like I love all the covers, but I really love his cover because it's so cool, man. It's so good, and he is an incredibly excuse me collaborative artist as well.
Mhm.
And I just think he's got a very bright future. Also, his use of color is
Yeah.
incredible, really incredible,
Yeah.
very impressive guy.
Yeah, his use of color is amazing. It's just out of this world. It just looks amazing. So I mean, like that's someone to watch out for. Now, New York Comic Con, all this is all set up. The addiction's going to be there too as well. Can we expect some people signing anything at your booth?
Yes, yes. So here's some exciting stuff. Excuse me, I got a little tickle in my throat.
No problem.
Not only will we have artists like Claudia Balboni, our interior artist, who she's the one who I believe captures
Mhm.
a Japanese style and a European style and combines them together in a
Right.
very, very modern, interesting. She's Eisner nominated artist for
Mhm.
Killer Queens. She's worked on Star Trek. She's worked on Fair Lady for Image, as well as a number of other titles. She's really fantastic. She'll be there signing. Andres Labrada will be there signing. I
Mhm.
will be signing if anybody wants my autograph on the comic book. And David Quinn, my partner and co-writer, he will be signing. We're trying to get David Mack over to the booth. We're trying to get Archer over to the booth. But even if they're not over at the booth, you can still go to their booth and get things signed. And also, Aletha Martinez will be signing. I'm not sure if I mentioned her. She'll be signing at the booth as well. And we'll have a schedule that we're going to put out there. Another thing that's really exciting and
Mhm.
interesting, we'll have two models dressed up as Nikki at the show. So if you want to take
Right.
pictures with your new favorite superhero, Nikki Tino, the Addiction, you can do that as well.
Right.
Um, then we will also be doing, this is an interesting promotion we're doing as well.
Mhm.
If you're a cosplayer, if anybody out there is a cosplayer or knows anybody's a cosplayer and wants to come to the convention dressed as Nikki, which
Right.
you're gonna be able to see if you go to the Addiction HQ on Instagram, you can see
Mhm.
images of Nikki. On the website, you'll be able to see it on theaddiction.co, as well as it'll be Facebook and X/Twitter and
Mhm.
TikTok. We're gonna have a little bit of everything, but if you want to dress up as Nikki or one of the other characters, you can come to the convention dressed as them. And the winner of the cosplay contest will be on the cover of issue number 3,
Oh
the
wow.
photograph cover. So
That's awesome.
and they'll get free copies of that as well. So we're gonna hopefully have this going on, and
I I
it's really exciting.
I feel like you should take this to distillery. I don't know if you've heard of distillery. I mean,
I
like,
have heard of Distillery. I
I
have.
feel like you should take it to them because um, that's the type of books and stories that they're going for. When I was interviewing Joel Jones, they're like, "This is not for kids," kind of things. Like it's very gory, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I feel like
Well,
it's going to be something like that.
it's there are expletives in the comic book. There is obviously drugs. There are drugs in the comic book, but I wouldn't say this is going to be a kiddie book or a general audience's book. But
Right.
I think anybody who's a teenager on up could read this and
Mm.
they won't be shocked by anything in there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but maybe that's the right company, Distillery. Who knows?
Yeah.
But
Distillery.
right now we're publishing this ourselves. We're printing this ourselves. There will actually be no publisher on the
Mhm.
cover of this comic book. Not even our uh, LLC that David and I created. It's not going
Right.
to have anything. And there's a very specific reason for that.
Mhm.
We don't have a company, and maybe we'll surprise you by the time we're ready to launch the regular number
Maybe.
one.
Yeah.
Maybe
Just
we'll
let.
have a publisher. So
Yeah.
it's also interesting though, because what I've learned from talking to other independent publishers and friends in the business is they said nobody's going to work as hard as you're going to work at in terms of promoting your comic book. And in essence, would it be nice to have a Marvel, a DC, an Image, a Dynamite, a Boom, an IDW, or Antarctic Press, or Distillery on your book, or Dark Horse on your
Hmm.
book? Sure, it'd be nice, but you know what? We're going to kick ass without that. And again, these are the obstacles I was talking about
Yeah.
earlier. You
Yeah.
know, I couldn't get one guy with my background in comic books
Mm.
over 37 years in comic books, being one of the most successful comic book dealers in the world. I
Right.
couldn't get one guy because I'm new to this,
Yeah.
and we couldn't get one person to commit to us as a publisher. But instead, what we did is we found partners in a variety of different ways. Again, never taking no for an answer and trying to figure out ways around
Hmm.
challenges. I like to spend 80% of my time on solutions and only 20% of my time, even less, on the problem.
Hmm.
Analyze the problem, figure out what it is, but you can't dwell on it. You got to figure out a
Right.
solution to it. So what we did is we partnered with Vivi. This is going to be huge. There's going to be
Hmm.
tons of people around the world who are going to be looking at the addiction who would never have heard about it because they're more digital people than they are
Yeah.
print people, collectors. And then this thing with legible is
Hmm.
going to be really big as well. We're still working on the
Right.
details, but it's going to be really big. And then of course we're going to be selling direct to the public,
Hmm.
and people are going to be able to buy straight from us, which I think is going to be really fun and exciting.
Right.
And then we're going to have the direct editions in comic books stores. And then what we're also thinking about is, after we finish issues 1, 2, and 3,
Right.
is if we do a graphic novel, we're going to probably put in the original story from issue 1 from 1997,
Oh,
which could be
wow.
really cool. Yeah.
I, I would like to see that. I'm all up for like original art there. So
Yeah.
before we end things in here, I want to plug in everything in there. First off, if you guys are going to New York Comic Con, please see if you can stop by Metropolis Comics. It's literally a haven in there. It's You're gonna be in complete awe. And one word of advice: try to bring a tissue. You'll be drooling all over that place. Uh, and then always, if you guys can, go ahead and check out comicconnect.com too as well. A lot of great books in there: CGC books, raw books, everything. It's just all up for sale in there. It's just amazing. And again, and check out Metropolis Comics. They're going to be at New York Comic Con in there. So uh,
Yeah.
David Mack, our Stanley Archer, again, Andres Labrada. It's going to be amazing. I mean, like, this book already, the first question I wanted to ask him was like, where can I get this book? So I might just,
The addiction.co. That's
yeah,
where you'll first be able to buy it.
it
Um,
started already.
yeah,
The addiction already started, right?
yes, yes, and that's the thing. What's your addiction? And hopefully it's
Yeah.
us. Uh,
So I
one other
might,
thing I want to just
go
throw
ahead.
out there is comicconnect.com. We always have amazing auctions, whether they be our mega monthlies or our event auctions. They're coming up all the time.
Mhm.
Our next event auction will be starting in early November and ending in late November. The mega monthly, I believe, starts in a couple of days, which has great opportunities to buy books, not only for your collection, but for investment and also for potential resale. The other things I would say is the addiction.co will be open soon. Keep an eye out for it. Hopefully in the next week or so, we'll have that website up and running, where you can learn a lot more
Mhm.
about the addiction. You have Addiction HQ on Instagram. You have Metropolis. It's MTRPLS HQ, and on Instagram as well. And we're out there all the time. And if you're in New York City and you're coming to New York Comic Con, definitely check out the Metropolis booth, check out the Comic Connect booth, and check out the Addiction, which is booth number 3537. They'll all be right next to one another. And we're going to have some really cool stuff there. We may even have, this is pretty cool, a $25 million
Whew.
Infinity Gauntlet filled
Oh
with precious
my eyes.
gems and stones. And that'll only be there probably one day for a few hours, but
Yeah, yeah, I
it's
can
going to be
only imagine.
crazy.
I can only
Yeah, we have to get
imagine.
the right security team in. And then also, if you're ever interested in coming by our showroom or gallery, whether you're in for New York Comic Con or another time, you can always call up and ask to make an appointment. Or you can walk in and try to just walk in to get a tour. but it all depends on if we're free at that moment.
Those are
Uh,
precious stuff in there. You can't just walk. I'm going to tell you people right now. Okay, make an appointment. You can't just walk in there and be like, "Can I see a Jack Kirby original?" No, 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 no. Make an appointment, people. Plan
yeah.
ahead. So, again, I'd like to thank Mr. Vincent Zurzolo here. Thank you again, sir, for being on the show. I mean, a lot of insights in there too as well. I mean, I know I have a lot of entrepreneurs that would like to see, themselves grow too as well. You have a lot of insights in there. So, I mean, again, for me, thank you for being here. You're the one person I've always wanted to talk to a collection
Oh,
about, and maybe we'll talk about it a little bit more too as
sure.
well. But again, thank you for being here, sir. Again, guys, you guys can also check him out too as well. He is also on Instagram. You didn't plug your Instagram yet. Your Instagram.
Oh, mine is just under my name, Vincent Zurzolo, but our business account is MTRPLS, Metropolis HQ,
There you go.
MTRPLS HQ. And hey, one other thing I'll throw out to people: if you instant message me, direct
Mhm.
message me, text me, send me an email. Anybody out there who's a budding entrepreneur or creator or whatever, if there's something I can do to help you, I'd be more than happy to do that. It's free of charge. It's just something I feel like at this point in my life, if I can give back a little bit in any way, shape, or form, I'd love to do that. I can't always get back to you immediately, so
Mhm.
bear with me, but I will do my best to answer any questions and try to help in any way, shape, or form that I can.
Yeah.
It's my pleasure, and thank you very much for having me on the show. It's been so much fun talking about my career in comic books
Yeah.
and the next chapter for me, and also getting to know you. And thank you so much.
We can go on for hours. I can tell you that much. But again, thank you for being here, guys. I always end my show with the immortal words from Jay-Z. You guys could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. I appreciate that. Have a great day, guys, and we'll see you next time.